Hello. Hello, lovely people. How's it going? Can everyone hear me? Let me know if you can hear me. Hey, John, how's it going? Mike, Osvaldo, Crone's Eye. How's it going, Kate? Cyberain, I don't know how to pronounce that name. Siglosson Jr., I guess. I am heard. You can hear me. That's great. Well, how's it going? So we're all in our hollowing stages, I assume. Um, let's get this out of the way first of all. Let's get this out of the way. So, here we go. I pulled it up. What is his name? Yasuhiro? Is that his name? Kitao. There's still a little bit of the way to go. That's what he said. It's not a ways off. Okay, this is a squishy. This is a little bit. This is a small amount. So the DLC, there's a little bit left to go, but they're making good progress. Okay, so oh, it's a little bit small. Yeah, you're right. Here, we'll make it bigger. Yes. Okay. Here's the key word here. Squishy. That means a small amount. So this does not now who knows, that could mean that there's still a lot to go, but he's saying there's just a little bit. So keep your faith strong, everyone. We're going to get the DLC. We're going to get the DLC. We'll get a trailer. I believe it's going to happen. I have to believe. Um, what does like Bloodborne mean? Oh, he was saying something about it was something like we'll get new bosses and things like in Bloodborne. I don't. I think he mentioned Bloodborne because he was part of that project. Yeah. No, look, we're gonna get a trailer. We're gonna get a trailer. 1 week. 1 week. That's all we have to wait. 1 week, and we'll get a trailer. We're definitely gonna get a trailer. The DLC is definitely happening, everyone. Probably summer next year. Yeah, yeah. We'll get a trailer. Don't worry. Yeah, yeah. Oh, Sovngarde. Yeah, exactly. New bosses and new characters like in Bloodborne. Yeah, he was just comparing the DLC to Bloodborne's DLCs. It's or DLC. That we'll get new bosses and new characters. He didn't really say anything. Everybody's losing their minds. It's just all he said was, huh, there's still, it's still happening. That's all he said, really. Will the funny tree be Godwin? I don't think the tree will be Godwin. But I guess, by the way, I don't really have a plan for this stream. I just figured, let's talk about some Elden Ring stuff, because it's been a while for me. So we can talk about whatever you guys want to talk about. Um, it would be surprising if we didn't get anything Godwin related in the DLC. Um, I would be really surprised if we. Yeah, I would be surprised if we didn't get anything in that direction. John says, honestly, the thing I'm hopeful for is that it'll take a long time because they're making new areas. I don't care about their boss design in this game, so I hope they're making huge legacy dungeons. Well, I mean, look, if they started on the DLC even shortly after the game's release, and I would actually, I would guess shortly before, that's like, you know, even if they release it in February of this year, that's still 2 years. 2 years for a DLC. That's not a DLC. You know, that's a huge. Like you got to imagine that they already have all of their systems. So like in game design, you have a large part of what takes up the a huge bulk of at least the beginning of game development is just building the systems. And they have all their systems. You know, maybe they'll introduce something new, but they have all their systems. They have their combat system. They know how everything works. And they've got all this data from PvP and all this stuff about balancing. So they already have the template. So it's just a matter of, you know, okay, well, we got to make some new bosses and some new dialogue um, and I mean, and that can be lengthy in terms of how much time it takes, depending on how many new enemies and bosses they make. But they already have the setup there. So 2 years to take that setup and design some new things. I think it'll be massive. Yeah, it's being called an expansion for a reason. Exactly. Yeah. Believe it or not, I want some updates to the base game, like even a multiplayer overhaul would be huge for the longevity of the game. I mean, yeah, yeah. The multiplayer stuff. Here's a I don't know if this is a spicy take or not. One sec. I don't know if this is a spicy take or not, but I've never really been a big multiplayer guy as far as the Souls games go. In the sense of like the calling it a multiplayer thing. I think, you know, the summon system to me the cool thing about the Souls multiplayer is mostly the asynchronous stuff, the leaving messages, all of those like weird mechanics that you had in Dark Souls, like what was it, Miracle Resonance and things like that, and hearing the other players ringing the bells. It's the sense of connection while also having like anonymity. Um, that to me is the really cool thing about the Souls multiplayer, because I mean this summoning is fun, like when you have friends and you're just joining them to go adventure together, or getting someone's help for a boss. Like, yeah, that's cool, but the competitive side of it has never really interested me that much, and it's also, that's a side of it which, like any multiplayer game, longevity is you know, if your game depends on a certain number of people playing the game, I don't know. Like Demon Souls, Dark Souls, you can go back and play those, and those are very solid games, even though you can't really, you know, there's not really a lot of people playing online these days. With Demon Souls, the servers are down, although you can, there is like a user built server base, but yeah, I don't know. I'm not super interested in the multiplayer thing, but I would not be surprised at all if they did something. I mean, they already did work on the Colosseum thing, so they at least finished that, which was obviously intended for the base game. But they might do something else as well. You know, maybe it's surprising that we didn't get any like covenants, because that would make That would have made sense for Elden Ring, especially with all this emphasis on like the different world views and the different people that you can sort of follow. Mm. Constesiano says, I enjoy the online in Souls games, but it's bland in Elden Ring compared to previous titles. Um, yeah, I don't know if I would say it's bland. I think it's less it, it's less emphasizing the unique qualities of Souls multiplayer. Mm. The series has the most cringe community in all of gaming. Oh, I don't know about that. I don't know about that. There's plenty of cringe, like, I don't know, gamer communities. Like, both of those words together, that's just a recipe for cringe. There's plenty of cringe gamer communities. Covenants were cool, but also a bit confusing. Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like they've had interesting ideas, like the whole thing with in Dark Souls, the Hunter's Covenant, and then sort of the evolution of that with the Farron, what are they called, the Farron something, and kind of the Aldrich faithful in Dark Souls 3. Um, it's that's kind of an interesting idea. Like you get summoned to a very specific area to defend it. Um, there are interesting ideas that you can play with. The grave lording, that's an idea that has a lot of potential that they've never really expanded upon. But yeah. Oh, I've been good, John. My holiday season has been excellent. Been eating plenty of food. That's the key. Um, Thank you for asking. Uh, People really love to hate on Elden Ring by saying that older games are better. Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm like partly in that camp. I mean, I made a whole video critiquing Elden Ring, and I think it's like you offend people on either side, and it's cringe both ways because I have all sorts of criticisms of Elden Ring. Um, Not necessarily based on like, oh well, Dark Souls did it better. But from the sense of, for me, it's like I'm really interested in Miyazaki because I think he's just a fascinating character, and so I like to see, well, where is his mind going, and where is his baby from software? Where is that going? Because he's really like, from software now is Miyazaki's baby. Um, and to me, it's interesting to see, what direction they go in. Because if you've done something in a previous game, it doesn't mean that you have to do it in the next game, if it works. But the things that they choose to forget, or, they choose to do something different, um, it kind of tells you their where their mind's at. And, not all of it is Miyazaki. I just it's I find it interesting from that perspective. So when I look at Elden Ring and I compare it to Dark Souls or Demon Souls, to me it's just about seeing like, well, why did you make those decisions to do something that to go away from something that you like. Demon Souls came up with all these crazy ideas basically because they thought it was a lost cause. Like nobody thought it was going to be successful. Well, maybe Miyazaki did, but nobody at the company at the time thought it was going to be successful, and so they thought, well, we could just throw in all sorts of crazy shit in there, um, and that's where all this creativity came from. And then kind of since then, they've come up with some new ideas, but it's never been that like creative storm to the same level. And if anything, it's kind of been diluted in many ways. But they've also tried different things, and I tried to make this point in my critique of Elden Ring that like, um, you have to appreciate what it's trying to do. So you can compare it to Dark Souls and Demon Souls, but it's not trying to do Dark Souls and Demon Souls, right? It's trying to do something different, and you have to appreciate it for that and see how it's doing on that front. So I get angry comments from people on both sides. Some people saying, "Oh, Dark Souls is awful. It's outdated," or you shouldn't compare it to these older games. That doesn't make any sense. You're just hating on Elden Ring. And then I also get comments saying I'm being, too lenient towards Elden Ring. So I don't know. It's cringe on both sides. Um, Grape Ape asks, for the DLC, should you be finished with the base game or not? I'm new to Souls games and expansions. So based on the scaling of previous DLCs, I would say you will probably want to be you'll probably want to be late game ready. So like okay, so Dark Souls 1, Artorias of the Abyss DLC, that was basically designed for pretty much post the main game, or at least you're near the end of the game. It's kind of that level. It was pretty hard. The enemies were pretty tough. The bosses were, they were as high up as you can go. Um, and I would say that's been generally the trend. Pretty much all the DLCs were kind of designed for that. Like Dark Souls 3, you had two ways to access the DLC. I kind of suspect it might be something like this. So in Dark Souls 3, if you um, there was a fairly early game area which could transport you to the first part of there were two DLCs, so it would transport you to the first part of the DLC. Um, and but it was definitely scaled a lot higher. Like it was not scaled for that level of you travel there from the cathedral, and like cathedral, these are pretty weak enemies in comparison to what you get in the DLC. And then if you went through that DLC, then you'd teleport to the second DLC at the end of it. Or if you beat the main game and you got to the final boss, at the final boss, you could warp to, or just before the final boss, you could warp to the second DLC from there, because it kind of thematically connected. Um, so it was basically designed as a, like, yeah, you've beaten the game already. Because they know that, like, okay, 2 years in, a lot of people have beaten the game already. They have multiple characters, maybe they've beaten it multiple times, maybe. So yeah, I would say, you'd be, if you want to be conservative, you could, have like a level 100 character, but probably like level 120, something like that is going to be, that's what I would guess. Of course, it could all be different this time. Like, it doesn't have to follow the trend of previous DLCs. So, ba, 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 ba. Dark Souls 3 is great by nature of being a Souls game, but it's clear the design structure was getting a bit limiting for the designers. Plus, they had a lot of DS2 phobia. I think the story of Dark Souls 3 is a tragedy of having awesome ideas which were then uh, mixed up as they really, really quickly late in the game tried to make it work and tried to change it up. Because if you look back through the clues that we have towards the development history and like what things look like in the alpha version and the versions like 6 months out from the game's release, like there's so many differences, and there's so many. I think more clearly than any of the other games, there's so many last minute changes, like problems that no one ever got to fix. Pop in textures, like terrible lighting glitches, and things that you normally don't really see that much of on the technical side in the Souls games, because they were just like they were throwing things at the wall at the end and just trying to make everything work. And so to me, I think it's like the linear nature of it. It was clear that initially it was going to be a lot more interconnected in the style of Dark Souls 1, and then they had to just have you basically teleport everywhere because they couldn't make it work. I mean, they cut huge areas. I mean, they moved around bosses. They changed the whole story. It was a pretty drastic reimagining. Um, Thoughts on the minor Erdtree Church being Miquella's early attempt at creating the Haligtree? There's so much about Miquella's story in the world that you can find. Miyazaki is really focused on him. I don't. Miquella. I don't really. I'd be curious what makes you think that has something to do with Miquella, because I don't really see a strong connection there. I mean, I guess there's the Golden Order seal, so something about fundamentalism, but um, yeah, I don't know what the Miquella connection would be there. And there's also like Melina has her America's Echoes there, so that seems more like just a America, possibly Radigan thing. Will the DLC actually answer any lore questions from base game, or only introduce more without any answers? Yes. I really hope the DLC will be a tighter and less repetitive experience than the main game. Um, well, here's what I'd say about that. I think open world games are inherently here's this is a spicy way to put it, but open worlds are inherently badly designed, which doesn't mean that an open world game can't be a fun game. But what I mean by that is when you design something, you're laying out the structure of an experience that you want someone to have. The problem with open world is that you have to design a structure, you have to design a game in which the structure is determined by the player. And so then it depends on how you telegraph to the player, how you communicate to the player, like what they should look for or how they should try and. Okay, here's the way to put it. An open world game requires that the player curates their own experience, as opposed to the developers curating that experience. I mean, obviously, there's a little bit of both, but so like, if you go, sorry, if you go and try and 100% every location in Elden Ring as you progress through it, I'm gonna say for 99% of people, you're not gonna have a great time. Um, but that's not obvious, because the problem with an open world is that you don't really know how you're gonna enjoy it. You know what, like, okay, how? Here's a question: in any open world game, look at Breath of the Wild or anything, right? How much time should I spend on the critical path as opposed to doing some side things, optional things, right? That's not a that's an open question. That's a question that the player has to ask themselves and answer, and you're kind of just guessing based on, the general vibe of the game. And that's the problem with open world games, is that you don't there's no there's no structure from the developers. Like when you design a really linear game, you can design it in such a way where everything is the experience is curated. So if you get to point B, like you can't get to point C without getting to point B. And so you can design it so that point B to point C, point, A to B to C is like this nice progression and it has this kind of arc to it, right? You can't do that with an open world game because maybe you just skip to point C. You don't go to point B at all. Maybe you never go there, or you come back there way, way later, and it doesn't make any sense now, in terms of you're having that nice balance between like fun and engaging, and also challenging and interesting and new. So what happens in Elden Ring, I think, for a lot of people is like there is a problem with the design, I think, in that it starts to get less dense as the game goes on. Like, Mountaintops of the Giants, there's like, four uh caves or catacombs or whatever. There's like not a lot going on there, and it's all the same enemies that you've already seen. And so if you spend a whole bunch of time in Limgrave and you see everything there is to see there, and then you kind of get to Liurnia and you start to slow down a little bit, then by the time you get to Mountaintops of the Giants, it's like, well, you've already seen everything there is to see. But if you spent less time in Limgrave, if you were progressing more linearly at the beginning, and then kind of following well, this is a little bit hard now, I'm going to go explore kind of path, I don't think you would have as much of that experience. I think maybe you still would to some extent, but it all depends on how you have designed your own personal progression. And to me, that's just an inherent feature of open world games, is that everyone's going to have a different experience, and it just depends on how, whether you feel something is repetitive or it starts to get boring. That's just kind of how open world games work. Maybe if someone spent 15 years designing a game in which it was this huge open world and everything was completely unique in it, that would be a different idea. But you'd still have this issue of pacing. So I'm getting off topic, but anyway, I think it's to some extent it's just an inherent feature of open worlds. Hmm. Crunchy just gets angry comments from Kitamura Sims. Yeah, you're not wrong. Um, any thoughts on Farum Azula being a sort of time machine that our beloved MacGuffin Miquella may have used to set the stage for a new iteration of the Lands Between? Um, huh. That's a wild idea. I've definitely been thinking about crazy time travel theories recently. I don't see a huge connection between Miquella and Farum Azula. Unless you think that statue in Farum Azula is Miquella, which is possible, but I don't know what that would mean. Um, hmm. Magister Ludi, can you elaborate on that? Because I don't know if I see the connection there. I really hope Miquella doesn't transform into evil Griffith, because that would be the epitome of eyebrow-raising lazy writing. Copying Berserk is what Miyazaki does. You have to realize this. He has no new ideas. He's just copying from the best. and Berserk is the best. So yeah, absolutely. I'm 100% on board with Evil Griffith. Um, uh, if we're gonna take trends from past game DLC, it's probably wise to keep it as modern as possible because of the growth of FromSoft as developers. Yeah, that's the thing. You can kind of make some predictions based on what's been done. I mean, even if it was all new people, they might look back and say, "Well, look, this is what worked in the past." So they could still continue on trends, even though it's a new. In many ways, it's a new company. Like there are still obviously people who have been there forever, a lot of them, but yeah, I don't know. You can't really predict anything. It's all different. This is a different type of game than they've done before. This is a different scale. The company's way bigger. You know, they're doing multiple projects at once, so the all the logistics are different. Um, we're gonna get Millennia, but worse, and no changes to make it more interesting for people obsessed with completing all of it, making the open world torturous for those who make many builds. Oops. I don't even know what the heck is this? I don't even understand this comment. Um, I wonder if I should start a new playthrough for the DLC. My plan is once it's announced, we'll get a trailer or something like that, and then I'll probably do like a lore through um leading up to the DLC. So if you want to join me for that, start a new playthrough, that would be cool. Um, Grape Ape says, "Thanks. I don't want to be over leveled." Yeah. Oh, also one thing I wanted to add is my sort of I have no idea if this is accurate or not, but my suspicion is that they might put the access to the DLC in Melania's boss room. So, um, if there's a connection with Mikola, then that's Mikola's body right there, and that would also, allow them to have some kind of something locking it off until you're strong enough. So it sort of ensures that you're not going to feel way under leveled when you get there. So like, because if you allow people to access the DLC from an early level and it's all like super strong enemies, then that's not going to feel great. So it would make sense from a design perspective to like put it in a place, put the access to the DLC in a place um, that is later on, and that would just make sense. So that's my suspicion. I don't know if that's going to be the case or not, but I would suspect you can access it from Melania's boss room, so you have to defeat her. Um, In the Elden Beast fight, you seem to be in between a distant light and a distant dark expanse. Perhaps the lands between is Midgard, and the DLC is going to take place in Helheim/Asgard. The Erd Tree is a world tree. Well, hmm, I think I don't know that I would go that directly. I don't think I would go with the super direct comparison there. I think similar concepts maybe, but I mean for one you have like a bunch of Erd Tree trunks in that boss room. So, what's going on there is that I don't think like we know that the Erd Tree is not a unique thing, right? Because Mikola was going to create an Erd Tree. There's all these minor Erd Trees everywhere. So, and then we have those Erd Tree trunks in the Elden Beast fight. So there is something about it which is not, it's not like this is the only Erd Tree that could possibly exist in the universe. I don't think it's exactly in the way that Yggdrasil is like, this is the world tree, this is the center of the entire universe, essentially. So I think probably you're probably on the right track with thinking of multiple realms, but the specifics matter here, I think. um Favorite group on the game, mine is a tie between the Black Assassins and the Fire Monks. Oh, I don't know. Um, favorite group in the game. What's my favorite group in the game? I guess I kind of like the Red Mane Knights. These are just like knight guys that are. There's sort of tragic battle, fighting against this awful cancer and giant dogs. Something cool about that. I don't know. I'd have to think about that, I guess. I wonder when the catacombs were built. I know they say they were built where great tree roots were, but they correlate to minor Erd trees, which I assumed came from the dying Erd tree spewing seeds. Um, yeah, there's a lot of confusion there. I mean, forget about like the whole great tree thing, but it is a bit weird because if you have catacombs, then presumably it's for people who have died, and if destined death is no longer part of the Golden Order, then why would there be people who have died? Um, so I don't know. Debit says, I think ER is the best open world structure I've seen thus far because of how it bottlenecks you with enemy scaling and world design. Yeah, like, I sort of agree in that, I think to the extent that it's successful, it's actually because it takes the open world in small increments. So something like Limgrave, you basically have the you're right. Each area of the game, there's only like one access point to the next area, roughly speaking. Maybe there's two for a couple of them, but like it does bottleneck you in that area. And even within Limgrave, it's divided into two sections, Limgrave proper and the Weeping Peninsula. And that forces you to like I don't know, it keeps the open world a little bit more confined. It's not like the Breath of the Wild formula where or Tears of the Kingdom where you like here's you starting in the middle and now it's just radially you explore outwards. I think you have a lot more issues with pacing. I mean, you also have no dynamic scaling for enemies in ER, which is I think a good thing, but also poses a lot. There's a lot of friction between that idea and an open world design. So I think they did a pretty great job considering that constraint. Um, Sig Lawson Jr. says, I can't wait to learn about Radigan and Renala's secret fourth child that we've never heard about, a la Ringed City. Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna get the like Melika, the secret child of dragons that's been hiding, in the branches of the Erd tree or something in a different time. Um the Eco Lorg says, I feel like Ronnie wasn't telegraphed at all. You need to teleport to the church to spam her. A friend literally got past Radahn without summons because he walked to the church instead of teleporting to it. Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, um, you can still get this like if you get past a certain point in the game, I don't know exactly what the trigger is, but if you get past a certain point without having warped to the Church of Ella and talking to Ronnie, then the summons appear, the Spirit Calling Bell and the Wolf summons appear in the Twin Maiden Husks shop. So you still have an opportunity to get it. Uh, you know, I don't know. That to me is par for the course in terms of not just open world design, but just the general like having freedom in a game. And I'm plenty fine with arguing against player freedom, because I don't think that player freedom is like the be all end all of, great things like more player freedom the better necessarily. Uh, but I think in that case, I don't. You'd have to make a compelling argument why that's a bad thing to me. Um, let's read some more comments. Do you have any theories about what the blue essence type thing in the sky is that you can see from the top of the tower in Raya Lucaria, accessed by Academy Crystal Cave, where you get Terra Magica? Well, you see it all over Raya Lucaria. It's not just from there. But I know what you're talking about. Obviously, visually, it's very similar to the red essence in the Forbidden Lands, and both of those are similar in some respects to the sort of guidance of grace, although it's more disorganized and it doesn't seem to lead anywhere in particular. Um, I think it has something. I think that is a visual representation of something to do with fate, but beyond that, whether that's like the fate of the moon um, or the fate of destined death, maybe that like the sort of memory of the fate of destined death in the Forbidden Lands, whereas grace is like somehow usurping that role of what fate used to do. Something along those lines. I don't really have any clear ideas about it though. Um, if we ever get to the spirit world / Helpin, will they put in the extra effort to turn the grace red? To be honest, I don't think we're gonna go to the spirit world per se. I just It doesn't sound right to me. I think maybe um we'll go to something that's like a spirit world, or it's got spirit world aspects to it, but I think it just wouldn't make that much sense. I don't think to explore the spirit world. I don't know why. I just have an intuition about that. I think we'll get like we'll get something which is more confusing than that. It's like there's a spirit world aspect to it, but it's also kind of like maybe a dream and partly in death, and it's also in the past, and there's also something in the future. Maybe I don't know. It'll be weird. I don't think it'll be as clear cut as like we're going to the spirit world. But I mean, if we did, I wouldn't see why they wouldn't turn the grace red, or have some kind of lore explanation for why it's not. Um, dun, dun, dun. Pretty far behind on the comments. Sorry. Let me read a little bit quick. Oh, the Erd tree at the church itself is misshaped like the Halig tree is, a different model to the... Oh, that's right, it's like twisty, right? Um, I don't know if that's necessarily about the Halig tree in particular. I think that the way that Erd trees are grown is to have two things twisting around each other. Because if you look at the dead minor Erd trees, the ones in like in the mountaintops, and I think the one in Gelmir, um, the way well actually maybe I could just go there and show this off. I think I showed this off in a previous stream. Um, they have this like twisty aspect. Actually, probably nothing's going to be loaded since my character's in Limgrave right now. But yeah, they also have this like twisty aspect, which kind of looks like there are multiple trees sort of intertwining. I mean, kind of what we see in the DLC image. Um, this will be funny looking at these LOD models. Um, where's a dead tree? Ugh, they don't have it loaded in. I wonder about the Gelmir one. Actually, it's weird that this one is dead as well. I guess that's like something to do with Godwyn, or it's partly dead. Hmm. I wonder if the Gelmir one loaded in. Probably not. We'll just do a quick check. Um, yeah, but I think there's something about like, because all the Crucible stuff as well. Yeah, okay, this is all way too low. I don't even remember where the tree is. Anyway, if you look at the dead tree trunks, um, well, that's funny. Let's look at the Haligtree from back here. That's pretty neat. If you look at the dead tree trunks, they have that like twisty aspect to them, which makes me think that along with the um, along with the whole stuff about like Crucible stuff being related to this caduceus pattern, to me that makes it seem like in order to have an Erd tree grow, you need to have two things twisting around each other. So I don't know that that's specific to the Haligtree. I think it's just like a young Erd tree does that. Um, okay, okay. Yeah, they don't look exactly like there's two things, but you can see that like the trunks are swirling around. It has that swirliness to it. Um, sorry, this character is like fairly new, so I'm still in Limgrave at the moment. So I can't really access them yet. Um, let's see. Oh yeah, and hey, Last Protagonist, how's it going? He also mentioned the cross tree shield. It also looks like it depicts a flame at its base. Oh. Um, let me find that real quick. Shields. Interesting. Yeah, that does really look like a fire. I mean, this is like if there's one idea that Miyazaki loves, it's like trees and especially a tree with like a fire inside it. I mean like, you know, Kiln of the First Flame, it's a giant tree trunk that you're inside with a fire in the middle. This is the basic idea. Um, Grape Ape says, when you stand behind EG near Caria Manor, you can see a landmass out in the sea. Any thoughts on what that could be? I mean, this just brings up the question of, like, what is the lands between? Are we in a real... Are we on a real island? Like, are we on the same level of reality as... Like, is there a whole planet out there of different countries and they can just sail to the lands between and it's just like a normal island? Or are we in some weird, like, pocket dimension or purgatory type place? Is this like, do you only get here if you by some magical means, or is it some combination of those? This is all questions up in the air. Um, Yeah, I don't know what other lands would like if you just made it like you're in the lands between, you make a boat and then you just go sailing westward. Like what happens? I don't know. Can you just reach another land and like, hey, let's start a new civilization over here? I have no idea. There is, but you mentioned Carrier Manor. There is something about the fact that the Carians always occupy the west coast. Where did I remember that coming from? Um, there's something that mentions that. I always thought that was a bit interesting. Western coast. Oh, it's the map of Liurnia's western region. The majority of Liurnia, known for its vast forests and ever-present fog, is sinking into a lake. The western coast has always been closely associated with Carian royalty. Yeah, I thought that was an interesting thing to say. Like, why would you say that? Unless there was some... Why would they be on the western coast? I mean, it could just be arbitrary. Could just be giving you information, like giving the player information about how the world is. But could be that there's a reason. Like maybe they came from the Western Sea. I don't know. Um, hmm. Ethan Washington says, I think the thing at the base of the cross tree tower shield is a simplified portrayal of the Crucible. It looks like the Dectus Road statues as well as stuff like Silurius' spear and helmet. Yeah, I think the phrase looks like is doing a fair amount of heavy lifting there, but yes, I basically agree. I don't know if it is the Crucible or if it's... I also just don't know what the Crucible is. So, but I do think that it's certainly in the same realm of ideas. There's something about like twisting roots and fire that's connected somehow. Um, Christopher Lepensi says, could be, but we know that the double helix is attributed to Mikola. Maybe the flame at the bottom symbolizes his acceptance of the crucible and being born of it. I don't think the double helix is attributed to Mikola. I think it's associated with Mikola, but it's not exclusively associated with Mikola. Because you have like the Godslayer's Greatsword, for example, or the Fingerslayer Blade, that don't seem to have any connection to Mikola. Unless you want to come up with a wild theory, which I will be more than open to. But I think that rather it's that Mikola is interested in the Crucible because that's how you create an Erdtree, something along those lines. And so the association with the double helix is because the Haligtree is a new attempt at an Erdtree, and he is using a similar process to the creation of the first Erdtree in order to get there. The Egyptians thought the land of the dead was in the west? Hmm. That's interesting. Um, the thing that I always notice about the lands between is the more north you go from Limgrave, the land itself get higher and higher and higher. Meaning, if you want to dock at the lands between, you have to go to Limgrave. Well, hmm. There is definitely like the evidence for massive geological change in the lands between. Because you have, for example, actually, let me just pull it up because it'll be easier to demonstrate this. So you're right that there is something... Okay, there's a couple things about like the structure of the lands between. I wish I could go faster. I probably could change the speed here. So this is all like, this is Altus Plateau, so this is all a plateau. We're very high up. You have Gelmir, which has all these pointy rocks, which is clearly volcanic. That's the result of some kind of volcanic activity. Then, as you get into Liurnia, what you get is cliffs on either side with this depression in the middle. And that's because Liurnia is sinking, which means that at some point everything was, at this height. It was at the plateau height, which is maybe still lower down than Altus. It could be that just over time everything sunk more and more. But then if we go over to Caelid, because there is this connection between Caelid and the mountaintops in that they both have, the same kind of, they have the giant crows and dogs, and they both have the giant, like, titan skeletons. And then you have this waterfall, which is like, clearly to me, this means that this is part of the same land mass. Like, it was not originally a completely unconnected landmass here. To me, that looks like there's been some. This is also really low resolution because I'm too far away, but you can see that, like, this middle bit. If you look at the map, like, I can't zoom out because I'm in this camera mode, but the whole middle bit, which is probably from some kind of meteor impact, is clearly there was some connection here. So I think there's been some massive geological change. But it is worth noticing that, like, all of the castles, all of those, like, forts and things are are touching the water, or they're, like, right next to the water. They're not, like, inland. Which I think might be important. So whatever that culture was that built those, like, Norman style castles, they came from the sea, I think. Have I ever given thought to the idea that Eochaid became Caelid? The Staff of Loss is found in Sellia, and it talks about discovery through acts of asceticism, which is what Eochaid was known for. Huh, I hadn't thought of that connection. And you do get the regalia of Eochaid there. Is there anything else that connects it? We just don't have that much about it because it all comes from Elamur, mostly. That's an interesting idea. I guess in general, we don't really know much about Caelid before pre-cancer Caelid, you know? So in one of my videos, I connected Eochaid to the mountaintops because the word that's used, so in the English it's ascetic, but in the Japanese it is Shugendoja, which is like, Shugendo is this specific, it's not really Buddhist exactly. It's somewhere in between, like, Buddhism and Shinto. There's this sort of tradition of monks, ascetic monks, who seclude themselves. They're basically like hermits in the mountaintops, but they're in the mountains. And this was something in Senpo Temple, as Last Protagonist points out. This was literally mentioned in Sekiro Shugendo. That was like one of the, what are they? They're not bonfires. Whatever the graces, the checkpoints in Sekiro. It was called Shugendo something. So that idea of them being associated maybe with the mountains. But if the mountaintops were connected to Caelid, then that's not a crazy idea. So, yeah, I'm not sure. Um, Foster says, not for nothing, but that looks like the three fingers sticking out of the bottom of the shields would fit with it being the Crucible idea. That's a little bit too far. I mean, yes, it's three things, but I don't know if I would go straight to the three fingers. Um, Usually when the three fingers are depicted, they're sort of all curled up in an awkward way. So yeah, I don't. There is, I mean, there's like the three. The number three has an association with the three fingers, but also with like with Moog and Bloodflame and stuff. And while that might be connected, I think it's more like there's this overall association with like two being duality and order and balance, and three is asymmetrical, three is more chaotic. And so I don't know if it's specifically about the three fingers. It's just that those is rather my interpretation would be that the three and two fingers are expressions of a more general theme of certain numbers relating to concepts. Like two is this that's the nature of the universe, yin and yang. Two, everything is duality. It's in balance, in harmony. And then three is like no, it's the offset. It's the asymmetrical one. So that kind of represents order and chaos, or fire, things like this. I think it's just a more general abstract association. Uh, has he talked about time traveling Radigan yet? No, no, I don't know. I've really been going down some weird rabbit holes in my head of time travel stuff. I mean the idea of Melina being from the future is really starting to appeal to me, but like I don't even have forget about evidence, like I don't even have a good reason to think that. Um Kevin Lasher asks, any thoughts on Zio's recent video on half the Halley tree being half burned down? Half burned down. Interesting. I have not seen that video. I don't know what the evidence is there. I don't remember. I don't remember if there's. Is there ash in that room in the like inside? I want to say there's ash in there, so maybe that's right. That would be interesting because it might be like you have something about rot and then trying to fight the rot with fire. Something goes wrong, it gets burnt. I don't know. I don't know. I'll have to watch that. That's an interesting idea. I hadn't really thought about that. Um, Howdy says, Elden Ring lore, everything is America. All right. To be honest, for a while I've been thinking of making a video called "America is Everyone," um, where I just go through all of the major characters and show how America could be them. Because, like, okay, America is Radigan, right? But then I think also Melina is America. She's like this memory of America. And then Melina is sort of Ronnie, and Ronnie is like this direct parallel to America. So maybe Ronnie is America as well. And then like Godwyn is sort of like Radigan, and Radigan is America, and Godwyn is like the blonde male version. So maybe Godwyn is America. And I mean, I went into it. America is the Glomite Queen. America is Fia. And America is Renala. America is the Snowy Crone. Just going through all of them, and then also the general, a more general idea of like this sort of Jungian individuation analysis of looking at America as the god of the world. So the entire world is it's hers. It's the world of her vision, and so all the people in it are expressions of her psyche. Um. Anyway, yeah, you cut me off on a everyone's America. Cowpie says until they explicitly show time traveling, I'm gonna pretend it's not in Elden Ring. Well, they did explicitly show time traveling in Farum Azula, so we know there is time travel. Um, Puzzleheaded says Gowry calls the Celians descendants of the Eternal, and they used to bleed silver. Wait, where does it say the Celians used to bleed silver? Can you remind me where you're getting that from? Because there's something about like the Night Folk. The Night Folk starting class says they used to bleed silver. But while I'm here, I'm just gonna start moving towards what's the cheat engine thing? I wanna take a look at one of those yeah, I would love to know where you're getting that from. Oh, the Night Folk. Okay, yeah. America is Miyazaki. No, Miyazaki is the greater will. Grape Ape asks, did the Zamor have their own god in the lore? I don't recall seeing anything. Would like to see more of them in the expansion. Someone had a crazy idea about the Zamor. Oh, that the Zamor might be Newman, or that the Newman might be Zamor, because they're both described as being long-lived, which is not a huge connection, but like I don't know. There is something about sort of enticing about having like the fire giants and then the frost elves sort of. Um I could kind of see it. I wish there was something else that I could connect the Zamor um to the Newman. But yeah, as far as we know, there's nothing that says that they have like their own god exactly. They're just sort of associated with winter, cold. Um, I don't think it even puts that in like any kind of religious context or like that's what they believe in. It's just that that's what they do. The only thing we really know about their beliefs is that they were sworn enemies of the fire giants, which would indicate that at least they're opposed to the fire giants, if not the fell god. But that it doesn't really say any kind of like positive thing. Um, the starting classes are so damn random. We never meet these people in the game. I think that's partly intentional though, because it's it's to give you a lot of freedom in how you want to role play. So if they made it like if the starting classes were really or the starting races were like really integrally tied into the game's lore in like with lots of different connections and stuff, um it would feel a bit more restrictive maybe in some ways. So this way it's kind of like it's ambiguous enough that it leaves it open for some imagination. This is the bastard sword assailant, not the claymore. I'm running the promo uh artwork promotional material build, essentially. Raging Wolf set and Bastard Sword. America is the greater will, and the greater will is everything, so America is everything. This is a very clear syllogism. Makes perfect sense. Yeah, those weird storm wolves. Exactly. Why do wolves pop out of the sky? I still don't understand that. I feel like there has to be some reason for that, but Roundtable Hold definitely has time shenanigans going on. I don't know that I'd say definitely, but it certainly seems like the Roundtable Hold is some kind of past version of the real Roundtable Hold. Ethan Washington says the Zamor was originally supposed to be the default spirit you could summon, right? I don't know how that weighs into anyone's theories, just putting it out there. I did not know that, actually. If that's true, that's really interesting. I mean, there are some weird things with the Zamor, because you have that Zamor trapped in a Everjail who carries Radigan's Scar Seal. Or, no, maybe his Source Seal. I can never remember which is which. So that's fairly strange. I don't know what to make of that. Um, let me look at the Zamor stuff real quick. There's a curved sword, right? Curved sword. No. Beastman. It's a big one. Where's this Zamor sword? What does it look like? Am I wrong? Is it not a curved sword? Am I just being... Oh, there we go. Weapon wielded by the Knights of Zamor who earned great renown during the war against the Giants. An apparent... Oh, okay, so it does say devotion to winter. So that does sort of indicate that they're... I mean, that's not surprising, but at least that tells you a little bit about their belief system. I believe that there's something good about winter. And then the armor... Zamor. Where are you? Oh, there we go. Hailed as heroes in the war against the Giants. These, yeah, see, long-lived warriors. They've been mortal enemies of the fire giants since time immemorial. Also, the thing about wearing masks, I wish I knew more about why everyone wears masks. Do the rest of the armor set say anything different? No, same thing. Yeah, there just isn't that much against about them, so... Last Protagonist says... Oh, hold on. The Zamor being a repurposed summon is from a Zuli video. Interesting. Huh. Yeah, because in the early trailers it was the Nox puppets. Interesting. But there's no Zamor spirit now, right? So it actually doesn't even exist as a spirit. Am I right? There's no Zamor. There's just this. That is interesting, though, that they're called a cold-blooded race. I wonder if they are related to the Zamor. Hmm. Um, Elden Ring player Covenant channel Nova Imperium Draken says, and that the Zamor being draconians probably had a relationship with the Ice Drakes. I don't think they're draconians, because that's actually the exact opposite of what they're... So, the Zamor and the Newman are both long-lived. The Newman are long-lived but seldom born. The Draconian guys in the like starting class are um, short-lived. I think it says something like that. They're the opposite of whatever the Newman is. Um, Tony Pepperoni says there's a loose set of connections between the minor bells that could connect them. Um, I wonder if I have those. No. I'd be curious what that connection is. The Zamor and Ice Dragons both fight the Fire Giants, but the relationship between Ice Dragons and Zamor is totally vague / unknown, I think. Yeah, we don't even know if those were contemporary. Because... What is it that says the Fire Giants drove... Is it the Borealis' Mist? It's Incantation, right? Or whatever it's called, Borealis' Mist, yeah. The Ice Dragons were once lords of the mountaintops long ago, until they were defeated by the Fire Giants and chased from the peak. Now, one way you could read that is that the Fire Giants came from somewhere else. Like, maybe, okay, maybe they were... Actually, I don't know how else you'd read that, because, like, either they were fighting or they weren't. So, to me, that reads like the Fire Giants sort of invaded the mountaintops. That line is hearsay in Japanese? Okay. But to me, that would suggest then much earlier, or at least, it doesn't have to be much earlier, but that would suggest an earlier point in the timeline than the Zamor, because the Zamor were fighting the Fire Giants in the war with the Giants. So that's like a more recent phenomenon. The Fire Giants were already stewards of the mountaintop at that point, which means that they fought the Ice Dragons first. There's other ways you could interpret it, I think, but that's the most natural way it reads to me, is the... there were Ice Dragons on the mountaintops. Fire Giants came in, invaded, drove the Ice Dragons out of there. Then the Zamor and the Fire Giants were mortal enemies, and they were fighting. And then the war with the Giants happened, and some of those Zamor guys are heroes in that war. But the Ice Dragons are modern dragons, so the Fire Giants must be more recent than the Ancient Dragons, then. Borealis is definitely a modern dragon. That doesn't preclude the possibility that there were non-modern ice dragons, but I agree that that's not the most natural interpretation. So, but that's totally possible. You could have, here's a proposed timeline, right? You have really, really, really ancient primordial times of ancient dragons. Placidusax is ruling, right? And then over a long period of time, you have like Grail and the birth of the modern dragons. And then everything else in history is like well after that. You just have to think of a really, really long time scale, and then it makes sense. Elden Ring Player Covenant channel Novum Imperium Dragon says, well, they both use storm abilities, that is, banished knights, who I think are draconians given the shared skin tones and textures. Do banished knights do they look like the draconian starting class? I did not know that. If that's true, that's super interesting. And the storm thing is interesting, yeah, because it is basically the storm stomp move, like the Zamor freezing wind or whatever it's called. So potentially there is something. There is some connection there. That could just be asset reuse, though. I would want to find something a bit more concrete to make that connection. Perhaps the Zamor worship the dragons. Their garb gives me that impression. There is a lot of scale armor in the game of various types. Like, okay, so let's see. Let's look at some armors really quick. So, Zamor. Yeah, so you get some of this scale armor there. Actually, it's better if we just put it on. Okay, so... Come on, I need to zoom in. Okay, so you get those scales on it, which certainly could be dragon-like scales. But you also get that, like, you get that on the Black Knife armor. You get these scales. You get it on all sorts of things, actually. Whereas... I don't think Godfrey has any. Just curious. You get, well, I don't, those are not scales, those are created. Let me see. Maybe there's a connection there. Maybe. Actually, I wonder if the chitin... Well, there's that real scale armor. Chitin... That looks like some kind of scaly thing there as well. Doesn't look man-made. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe there's a connection. Edgar is a banished knight, and so are the two generals, and we can't see under the armor of any of the others. What if the giants were already living in the mountaintops? They rose up against the frost dragons, and because of this, the Zamor hate them, and that's why they fight, because cold allegiance. Yeah, or even dragon allegiance, like this whole thing with, I feel like there's something really important about... Okay, if you look at, like, the major... You sort of squint your eyes and forget about the details in Elden Ring's story. Like, what's the major event in the story? It's Godwyn's assassination, right? The Night of the Black Knives. That's, like, the focal point of the story. This is where everything... Like, this is why the Elden Ring is shattered, and the Shattering War happens, and the Greater Will abandons us, and all of this stuff. This is, like, the key event. So it's all this mystery of who Godwyn is. And Godwyn, there's all these parallels, like you have the Jesus parallel, right? Because he's the golden child, he's the son of God, he's a martyr, he's betrayed and assassinated. This event has to be really important. And one thing that seems really important about Godwyn is that he made peace with the dragons. And he sort of, like, was able to find a way for dragons and humans to coexist because of this shared relationship of gold. So the yes, the uh, sorry, I just read a comment. Um, that seems to me really important. The idea of this relationship between humans and dragons, and like kind of respect for dragons. Also Godric says, he calls them trueborn heir and kindred. So there could be something about like the Zamor. Maybe they don't really have a relationship with the ice dragons, but they could be sort of respect the ice dragons, perhaps. Um, yeah, I could see something like that. I would just, we have all these like ancient events and things like that, but there's no, like, we never hear about any interaction between the Beastmen and the Fire Giants, or the Beastmen and Zamor, or the Beastmen and the Astrologers, or the Beastmen and the Nox, right? We never hear about any interaction between like these ancient cultures, except in these very, very small little clues. We never hear about like the Deathrite priests and their interaction with anybody else. So we know that there's all these things that happened before the Golden Order, but it's just sort of like random little snippets, and they're all unconnected. So I don't. It's hard to really get a clear idea of like what the progression of events is, because you can't really put them in like a narrative framework. They're just little clues. Um, Baylad asks, did Godwin make peace with all the dragons or just the lightning ones? And what happened to the various colored dragons that the Drake talismans mention? I don't think the Drake talismans really mean that there's like specifically different colors of dragons. They're all referring to ancient dragons. It's just that the talismans themselves deal with different aspects. The shape of the dragon has become symbolic of all manner of protections. So it's not really like that there were different colors of dragons or anything like this. Yeah, it is interesting though that Godwin. I assume he made peace with the ancient dragons. I guess nobody really cares about the modern dragons. There is a general theme in Elden Ring, though, of like. So there's a theme of like committing yourself to a higher power, and the way that it's both a theme, but it's also like very literal in the narrative, in that you are an empty vessel that needs to be filled by, a worldview, and that worldview is personified in the form of some kind of god or something like this. And that, like, literally, Marika is like hollow at the end, right? And she has the Elden Ring, which is the Elden Beast inside of her. She has this golden beast. Um, and like the fire giants, they have this face in their chest. And with the dragons, the ancient dragons, like Placidusax, his inside is gold. Um, and with the modern dragons, my sense is like somehow they're removed from that, and so they're open to being filled by something different. And that's why wherever you find them, they've integrated the thing of nature in that environment, like the rot, or this like magical glintstone breath or whatever. So my sense is that they're all, it's like they're being, there's a god-sized hole in them, essentially, that is filled by the natural forces of their environment, something along those lines. Um, Let me see if I can, let me see if something loaded in yet. Where am I? Is this Caelid? What the fuck? Let's see if I'm close enough to find one of those dead trees. Yeah, and Sovngarde brings up Borealis is a modern dragon, so that would maybe make the ice dragons closer in the timeline compared to Grandsax's assault on Landell. It's... Yeah, maybe. Maybe. I don't like it, but maybe. This is still not loaded in. Thomas Bergquist says, I'm assuming being born to a single god equals default Empyrean, but other Empyreans can also be chosen by the two fingers. Yeah, that's my... Oh, is this shield still up? Sorry, I wasn't looking at the stream. I'll get rid of this, shield. We had that up earlier because we were talking about twisty trees. So actually, yeah. Let's see if we can find it. I bet the Gelmir one is loaded in. What were we talking about? Oh, the modern dragon. Yeah, the dragon timeline. Man, I don't know. That one is confusing to me. Because, yeah, it does feel like that has to be a long time ago. Like, it has to be before the fire giants were defeated. There were modern ice dragons. But I don't know. Jason says, my crackpot theory is that ER humans are just extreme distant descendants of the ancient dragons, shedding their impurities, horns, scales, tails, etc. over millennia of epigenetic evolution. This is something I think I've briefly talked about before, that there is this thing of, like, the division of life. Like, first of all, you have everything is bigger in the past, right? Things get smaller over time. So you have, like, Grandsax is gigantic. The ancient dragons are pretty big. And then, like, the modern dragons are a bit smaller. You have the giant Titan, where am I going? The giant Titan, skeletons in Caelid and in the mountaintops. And then you have, like, the fire giant, who's, like, pretty big. And you have those giants in the underground thrones. And then you have trolls. And even, like, with people, you have the vulgar militia, who are small. And you have, I don't know, what else? There's other things that are bigger in the past. What else is bigger in the past? I remember I had a whole list of things. But if you go along with the idea that, like, well, in the Crucible, all life was blended together, then there's this, like, progression of life is blended together, life is big, and then it gets divided apart. So one of the crazy ideas I had, because we also know that Lansseax took human form. So if you think Lansseax, ancient dragon sized, took human form, okay, if Grandsax is much bigger, if he took a humanoid form, wouldn't he be a giant? So maybe the giants are dragons, or they're divided off from dragons. And then I had this whole crazy idea about, like, the beastmen, and the whole idea of, like, yeah, maybe everything is just being divided. There's different life forms being divided. And so you have, like, you start with a dragon, which is kind of everything in one, right? It's got scales, it's got a tail, it's got wings. Like the whole point of a dragon is that it's a combination of creatures. You know, it's like lizard and bird and mammal all in one, and it breathes fire. It's everything combined. Um, so maybe you start with dragons and then you just keep on dividing them until you get different life forms. So you like separate out a beastly part, and then you get Sarosh and Horalu. You separate out a the giant part. You separate out, and then like the more you separate it, the more you're sort of like refining. So the idea with the Empyreans is that you're like purifying your spirit because you get a shadow beast which is tailored for an Empyrean, as if it's like you take out the beastly parts of yourself, those remaining beastly shadow side parts, and you produce this shadow, and then that means that you are more divine, you're more pure because you're like refining, and I don't know, something along those lines. That's I don't know if I have like much evidence to support it, but it just makes sense to me. Fully frenzied hour. Yeah, exactly. Um, come on. Do I need to make some? Let me read some comments. Okay. What's your take on why Grandsax attacked the capital? I think it's an interesting plot point since Lanciax and the others didn't seem so on board with the plan. Well, I don't know that they didn't seem on board with it. It's just a matter of timeline, right? Like, there was a war with the ancient dragons, Grandsax attacked, and then peace was, Godwyn fostered a peace between them. So I think it's just a matter of Lanciax, that piece is something after Grandsax attacked. But why he attacked? That's a good question. And I don't know if it's like, was Farum Azula in the sky and out of time at that point? In which case, like, how did he? Maybe that's something that Marika did. She like purposely did something to Farum Azula, and so they're angry at her. I don't know. It's all kind of just like speculative. It could be the creation of the Golden Order itself. I don't know. John asks, wait, speaking of Gowry, Crunchy, have you ever talked about his transformation into the Kindred? Because I feel like the game might be telling us that the Kindred is the real Gowry taking human form. Yeah, I think that's a reasonable conclusion. Or at least he's the Kindred is like the reborn form of him. Um, I kind of like the idea of Men in Black style, like this bug wearing human skin, because it just feels like something weird and creepy that Miyazaki might do. I don't really have a reason for thinking that. It just sounds fun as an idea. Um, yeah, I don't know. Do you have a particular like question about that? Cyberrain asks, expectations aside, what are your conceptual DLC hopes? Like, are you talking about story or just game in general? Um, Story, I mean, I think what I want is well, on one level, what I want is something that would confirm all my suspicions and crazy theories about like the world being split apart and the Helfin being pulled inside out and all these crazy ideas. Um, but also, I don't really want to be proven right because I think it would be more fun to have everyone's theories be upended. Um, and I also kind of expect that to happen, but that's what I really want. And I think story wise, what I would love is more elaboration on like the thing that's interesting about Elden Ring to me is how elaborate and recursive the structure of the world is. Like, because you've always had this idea in the Souls games of this like uh this thing about reality being a sort of literal exaggeration of themes, like concepts and themes. There's like this manifestation of ideas in the world in a very literal way. He takes like metaphors and makes them literal. That's the whole, like, a perfect example of this, the gaping dragon from Dark Souls, right? The gaping dragon is this dragon that sits at the bottom of the sewers where all this crap and you know dead bodies and whatever, like you have this biosphere of different layers. You know, at the top you've got all the hollows, and then you've got the rats, and you've got the slimes, and you've got all this stuff, and it's all sort of like washing down. And the gaping dragon is the thing that sits at the very bottom. It's the bottom feeder of the entire ecosystem. And so it's this gluttonous beast. And so as a result of that, it becomes all mouth, right? And it's not really like, there's not really a reason for that. It's just this sort of expression of the metaphor into a literal reality. So, this is like the key thing about Miyazaki's stories. I think that's been true since Demon Souls. It was basically the point of Demon Souls with what the Soul Arts did, like the exaggeration of things, like you know the fat officials, like they're incredibly cruel and stone-hearted essentially, and so their face is literally like calcified into this horrific sadistic smile. It's like their face just sticks that way. So it's always that thing that I love about Miyazaki is that playing with metaphor and like making it a real, the poetic side is made literal. But in Elden Ring you have it to an even greater extent because the whole idea of the Elden Ring is that concept, but it's like way more elaborated. It's way more part of the in-universe lore. It's not just like, okay, magically metaphors become reality. It's like, no, actually there's a whole system for how this works. So what I would love from the DLC is, you know, I don't think I would want super explicit information because that would make it boring, but I would love to get more food for thought on how that system works. That would be my general sense of things. Um, do you think Shadow of the Erdtree will be a remaster with more content like Scholar of the First Sin? No, I think they've been making something new. I doubt they would. I don't think, I mean, Miyazaki loves to, like, the whole point of Dark Souls 3, the whole theme of that game and of especially of the DLCs was like you need to keep on making something new. You can't stick with what you fuck. Um yeah, you can't stick with what you can't stay stuck. This is the theme of all Miyazaki's games actually. Like, stagnation is bad, you know? You gotta move on. So I don't think he's just gonna keep on adding stuff to this. Um, the whole theme of DS3 is that DS3 sucks. Yeah, sure. Um, Elden Ring Player Covenant channel Novum Imperium Dracon says, I wonder if the DLC will be basically purgatory between the living realm of the Erd slash Great Tree and the spirit realm of the Helfin. Do you guys perhaps cover those already before I showed up? No, I don't know. I mean, the only thing I said was I don't think we're literally going to the spirit world. I feel pretty confident that whatever we're doing, it's not going to be as clear cut as saying we're going to the spirit world or we're going to the past. I think it's going to be more nuanced and complicated than that. It might be very similar to those ideas, but I don't think it's going to be exactly that. ER cut content is interesting in relation to Shadow of the Erd Tree, since the Miquella quest was cut at the last second. His dialogue is the most interesting, though, if you want to look it up and read it. Yeah, we should read that. Welcome, J-Dub Luffy. How's it going? Let me look that up. So, Wait, how do I... Why is this not popping up? Oh, there we go. So what is it? Something about my drop of dew. Is this it? No. This is the one, right? Young seedling, return to the bosom of the earth, but remember well, thou art mine. So shall I give of myself, this is for thee. Mine abundance, my drop of dew, quench thy thirst throughout thy frame. Blossom and burgeon time and again. Grow larger, stronger, until the day cometh, when thou canst share in my dream. Elden Ring, oh Elden Ring, beget order most elegant from my tender reverie. Yeah, I mean it's certainly interesting. It's interesting. I don't really know what to. Oh, there's also this. If thou covetest, it would probably be something like this. If thou covetest the throne, impress my vision upon thine heart. In the new world of thy making, all things will flourish, whether graceful or malign. Yeah, I don't really know what I don't know what to make of that. That does imply that thou covetest the throne. That you could be Elden Lord enacting, assuming this is Miquella, enacting Miquella's vision. So it's not necessarily... I sounded like Dobby. That is a compliment. Thank you. In fact, that's maybe the best compliment I've ever heard. We all love Dobby here. That's kind of interesting, because that kind of suggests that maybe Miquella... Like, okay, with the caveats that we don't absolutely know this is Miquella speaking, and we also... This is cut content, so who knows? But that would kind of imply that Miquella is not necessarily opposed to the entire system. I don't even know if it's possible to be opposed to the entire system unless the Frenzied Flame is something like that. I wonder if this is all. You know what's kind of interesting here is that, okay, so these are all the endings, right? Age of Fracture. Age of Fracture, okay. Age of Order, and the Age of Absolute is just a different word for that. Age of Dustborn, Blessing of Despair. And then we have Ronnie, and there's an alternative Ronnie one. Then we have Melina for the Frenzied Flame ending. And then this. Oh. Interesting. Because then after this, then we go on to... That's Melina. That's not even Melina's first cutscene. That's her second one. And then it goes back further to the intro. This is later. So I guess it's not really that, it's not really that organized. What if Melina is Miquella? What if Melina is Saint Trina? Wait, what am I doing here? It's Miquella's dialogue. We also have the voice actor for him, which is the girl who voices the first young voice option. Oh, really? Is there actually cut voice acting? I don't see it. If someone knows, if there's actually cut dialogue, like recorded audio for Miquella, I have not come across that, so I would be very interested. Oh, I see. She's credited as the voice. But we don't know that she said those lines, right? Yeah. Yeah, I wonder about that. Skyrim is for the Nord says, what if the player is Marika? That's a good question. What if? What would that mean for the world? I thought it was odd Ronnie had nothing to say about the Frenzied Flame ending. Yeah. I wonder if having a Lord of Chaos prevents the possibility of an Elden Lord. Like, I wonder if, like, when you do the Frenzied Flame, it obviously looks like everything is screwed up, but... Like, is that the entire universe is just consumed in a ball of fire, or... is that just the new state of things? Because I would sort of lean towards the second that like maybe there's maybe that's not the only thing that can exist in that. Maybe you can have an Elden Lord as well. I don't know. It's unclear where that ending ends up. Um, how does Melina put us to sleep on top of the cauldron? I thought the Tarnished was just tired after fighting the fire giant. That's a good explanation. That we're just sleepy. Yeah, this game is really gorgeous. There is something odd about that scene. Because she does have this obsession with, like, grabbing your hand, you know? And I don't really know... She likes to touch you. And then that time it looks like... She literally just, like, touches you, and then you just, like, collapse. It's instantaneous, you know? It's not like... Yeah, I don't know what to make of that. To me, it feels like... Ranni can put people to sleep too? Yeah, that's true. But she uses, like, a fog. Yeah, I don't know what to make of that. It feels important. And then you wake up there. And, like, also sort of going to sleep and then waking up in the Dragonland. Like, we already did this in Dark Souls 3, right? You, like, meditate and you appear there. And it's sort of unclear whether this is, like, you're literally teleporting or you're sort of dreaming it. Because there's also this, at least in Dark Souls, there was this implication that, like, I always kind of connected the dragons with, like, Buddhism. Because they're so, like, unperturbed by the impermanence of life, right? They're, like, completely static, essentially. So there's something Buddha-like about them. They've, like, become enlightened. So much emphasis on hands in this game. So many cutscenes zoom in and focus on a hand. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, especially the Elden Beast is the one that really sticks in my mind. But yeah, like almost all the cutscenes, Rykard, I think maybe the Fire Giant is like, I can't remember if there's a hand cutscene, but yeah, a lot of them do focus on hands. Hands and fingers. This game is all about hands, fingers, eyes, hair, chests. It's all about different body parts, you know? In fact, the only thing it isn't about is feet, which is kind of interesting. No, but actually, it's also, yeah, disappearing legs, that's a thing. So, she puts us to sleep with her gloam eye. I don't like the Melina is the gloam-eyed queen idea. I don't know why. Or I feel like that's not enough. That's not enough to explain it. There has to be something more going on. Going to Farum Azula feels like an improvised last-minute change. You know, that's how I felt initially, but now I kind of wonder. I don't see any of the signs that I would expect. Like, because Farum Azula actually feels a lot more detailed and like worked upon than let's say the mountaintops. So I'm not totally sure about that. It would have made more sense to me if we come to and the forge is in front of us and Farum Azula is now around us instead of in the sky. I mean, I just don't... I don't know what the deal is there. Because it's clearly not in the world in the same way that everything else is. Like, there's Farum Azula, right? So theoretically, let's see, should I be able to see it or no? Probably not from here, but let me see. Actually, no, let me get closer first. But you can see it's not even loaded into the game until you either go to the, if you warp to the Grace at the isolated Divine Tower, or if you warp to Farum Azula itself. It's just not there. Like, you can look at it, you can put a pin on the map, it's not there. So Farum Azula does not exist in the Lands Between in the way that, like, Caelid and Limgrave exist. It's somehow separate from those. So and I think, I mean, I know this is not explicit, but to me it's like, this is about as, I feel like it should just be canon at this point, that obviously Farum Azula was connected to the ground at some point. I don't feel like you can make a compelling case for doubt there. I feel like that's just clear. Oh, come on. Let me just get a little closer here. You can see Farum Azula from the top of a Divine Tower. Don't remember which. Yeah, the isolated Divine Tower. If all the Lands Between is a dream / vision of something that already happened, then Melina is just jumping it forward when you fall asleep there. Whoa. That's interesting. I will take that under advisement as I consider more crazy time travel theories. It's not in the Land Between, it's in the skies above. Yeah, exactly. Let me put on this free cam. See if this can. So there's no Farum Azula there. Definitely. Should be right there. What does it take to get these trees to load in, man? I guess I could go... I don't know if the Gelmir one is different is the problem. Really wanted to, okay, I may not be able to get these trees to load in. You can go and look at them for yourself. There's one in the mountaintops and one in the consecrated snowfield, I think, and they're both dead, and you can see that they twist around. All the dirt and roots near the bottom of Farum support that statement. Oh, about it being connected? Yeah, I think that's clear. And Gurink's temple, exactly. Yeah. Assailant says Farum Azula is in the times between. That is very literally true, because that is what the it uses the same, was it like Hazama or something? These sort of like interstice, whatever the Japanese word in the text for the Lands Between is, like this sort of like a gorge or a valley or an interstice or a ravine, something like that. It's like a place in between things. And then when it talks about Placidus X's throne or his arena or whatever, it uses the same term, but instead of like the land in between, it uses the time, the place between time. Say Gelmir again? Gelmir? Gelmir. Did you hear that one theory that the entire game is mixed dream and the DLC will be us going into the real world? crazy stuff, man. That's interesting. I hadn't heard that, but I was looking at uh right. No, how do I just do the desktop? I guess I could just pull this up. Hold on. I was looking at the DLC image. Where is it? Oh, it's way too big. What the heck? Why is this so goddamn big? Okay, I was looking at the DLC image, and like, I don't know, something about this, like the tree is real. You have these ruins, and then you have like ghostly things, and then fields of wheat. I don't know. For some reason, I was thinking like, oh, what if this is the real world, and what if we were always the dream? I don't know. I don't know. There's something slightly unsatisfying about that, though, because then it kind of makes it feel like the base game was like, oh well, what was the point of that then? You know, I feel like it shouldn't. I don't want it to be so clear cut. I think that would be less interesting. But George came up with the lands between. Yeah. Well, I don't know. Yeah, didn't we have the Rift lands in that early leak trailer? Everything is it's in between time and space. Thoughts on Torrent's whistle being unaffected by the frenzied flame? Is it? I thought it burns. Right? It burns at the end. Yeah, it does burn in Melena's hand. I think people still overthink what George did. It's really minor compared to what the final game is. I don't think it's minor. I don't think it's minor at all. But I think you have to understand how this works. Most of the time when you make a game, you're not going to start out with 100% completed story. Like, because as you make the game, you're going to realize things about the development. So you start developing, and then like, okay, you build your systems up, and you start making the world a certain size, and you put in bosses, and you create this progression and all this stuff. And over the course of that, you have to take alternative paths. Like maybe you planned on having this boss here, and then you change it. And like that's the whole point of development, is that there's constantly changes being made. And that's going to affect the narrative. So you don't start with a finished story. So it's when you have something like what George was hired for, he wrote a story. Like he wrote, maybe it's not a novel exactly, but he wrote something where clearly he wrote about the demigods, he wrote about the history, he wrote like some, essentially like, if you get some fantasy novels or sci-fi novels, sometimes you'll get like appendices that have, like the Silmarillion or something like that. That's more elaborate, obviously, but like just sort of fleshing out the world and giving you little vignettes and stories and things like that. So I'm sure there was plenty of material in there. Miyazaki did not need to stick to that, and I'm sure that he didn't in any, like, if he kept things, it's because he wanted to keep them. And if he changed things, it's because he needed to change them. George could have contributed a tremendous amount. That doesn't mean that it necessarily made it into the final version of things. I don't think it's... No, I don't even think it's that George made the past and Miyazaki made the present. I think it's George wrote something, and then Miyazaki was like, oh, those are cool ideas. Now I'm going to make my game, and at the end of the game, the story will come together based on how the game development is going. And it's going to be taking elements from that initial story that George wrote, but it doesn't need to be it doesn't mean that he like that's canon or that George created ideas which then Miyazaki like I don't know. It's he probably came up with a lot of ideas and Miyazaki adopted them and changed them how he wanted. Like Miyazaki even mentioned that like George would be really surprised by the demigods because it seems clear that they were like he wrote about them as people and then Miyazaki made them into like Rykard turns into a snake and all this crazy stuff. So I think if we were to ever get George's what he wrote, I think you would it would read like what would the equivalent be? It would be something like comparing The Hobbit to The Lord of the Rings. It's like The Hobbit, you have the basic foundation of the world there. You have some of the major factions are alluded to. Um, you have the necromancer and this implication that you have some of the stuff there. You have a mention of Saruman, I think. Although that might have been Tolkien going back and rewriting it, but but like that does not give you the sense of the metaphysics of this world. Um, that does not give you the sense of like what the real story of the world is, like this age of man descending into. I don't know. I think people are at once too dismissive of George's input, but also like it doesn't really matter what his input was because he has nothing to do with game design. So wasn't George horrified at what Miyazaki turned the demigods into? I don't think George knew exactly. It was Miyazaki saying that he thought George might be surprised if he saw the demigods. He compared it to the DM's handbook in D&D. Yeah, that makes sense. I think he could have gotten this thing from George and then completely changed every aspect of it. That wouldn't it basically just like here's some narrative ideas for you to because like Miyazaki is coming in, he's not gonna get a story and then go, oh well, now I'm gonna completely forget about all the things that I care about in terms of narrative design. Like, no, obviously Miyazaki is coming in with his own ideas, and that's why Elden Ring is so similar to his previous stories, because he is he has certain ideas that he wants to express in his stories. But Elden Ring's very big. There's lots of details, so George is like fleshing out this world, and then Miyazaki just takes that and like, okay, those are cool ideas. I'm gonna create my own story out of that. Yeah, adaptation. Yeah. I remember Miyazaki saying something like, I took what George gave me and what we came up with, and then I sort of twisted it and fucked it up and make it distorted. Yeah, exactly. Hmm. Well, I think I'm reaching the end of this stream. I need to eat some food and have some coffee and do something else. So I think we'll leave it there. Uh, Here's my plan. So we're getting the trailer in a week, hopefully. Hopefully. I'm probably not going to stream the Game Awards. I'll probably hop in someone else's stream. If we do get a trailer, I will probably If no trailer, we riot at Crunchy's house. Yeah, I think if we get a trailer, then I think what I'll do is after we see it, I'll probably try to like download as high quality a version as I can, um and then we'll like go through it and do a frame by frame analysis of whatever little meager scraps we get, and see what we can look at. So I think that'll be the plan. And if we don't, then maybe I'll stream anyway, just so that we can all commiserate together. Um, and then, assuming that we do get one, I think I'm gonna start doing uh, a lore through of the game from the beginning and try to see where we get with that. So that's the plan. All right, everyone. I am out. Take care.